on, Nanny. It's Nanny Nooners. Yeah. Oh, she's totally destroying this couch. Here she is. Good girl. Hi. Well, it is. It is the Celtic New Year. Also known as Halloween, and that other word that I can see in my head but cannot say correctly, so I'm just not going to say it. Hi. Oh, she's a good girl. Yes, she's a good girl. So it's that time of year, and it gets dark. Light is precious in the evening after work, but we drove into the big town, and it got squinched under there. Can you get that ball? You got it, good girl. So we went into the big town that has a big park, and it actually has a dog park there, which is really cool. One side of it is for small dogs under 25 pounds, and the other side is for large dogs over 25 pounds. And we had the place to ourselves today, large place to ourselves, because everybody's out trick-or-treating, I guess, and it's freaking cold, and it's dark. It's getting dark early. It's only 7, just a little after 7, and it's dark, completely dark. Although on the way home, I saw a wonderful sky formation, a light formation in the sky. It was really interesting, a little abstract orange shape. It was really cool. But I've been sort of thinking this evening, since I stopped work and started getting ready to go out, I was thinking about how I've always been afraid, and I've been so afraid that I couldn't even admit to myself that I was afraid. And a lot was behind that. But what came in solidly was thinking about moving away from the place where I got bullied. And I moved on the night before my 14th birthday, and which happened to be Thanksgiving that year. And we had been in the Macy's parade. The band, the school band, of which I was like, I don't know what I was called, but I carried a fake gun in the front of the line because I wasn't talented enough to be in the color guard or anything like that. I wasn't comfortable enough in my own skin and didn't have friends to carry me along. So I tried out on my own by myself, and was just, very, I don't know, robotic, I guess. Robotic. And it couldn't have hurt. It didn't help that I did it to Rick Springfield's Jesse's Girl. I don't think. But I ended up carrying a fake gun, a fake white rifle, uh, next to the people who were carrying the flag. In the Macy's parade. Um, wow. And then when we got back from New York City, my parents picked me up and we drove to the new town. And it was dark. And on the way, I vowed to myself that I would never be stepped on again. And so I kind of reinvented myself when we moved into this new town. And I chose to go back a grade because my birthday is at the end of November and I was always younger than everybody else. So when we moved, I chose to go back a grade so that I would be a little older than everybody else. And I just kind of went in swinging. Not really, but I was ready to swing, I guess. I went in wary, and when the preppy girls, approached me to be friendly, I was wary, and I sort of kept to myself, but I quickly made two friends, Mary and Tracy, and we became very good friends very quickly, and it was like it was fast friendship, and we would spend the night at each other's houses and go roller skating together and all that kind of stuff, and but like one time I was walking with them arm in arm down a corridor at school, and singing or whatever we were doing, and then like one of the toughest girl in the school was like shut up or whatever, and and I said no, and and she's like, well, come over here and say that. And Tracy was like grabbing my arm and saying, just shut up. And I was just like, I extracted myself from her grip and went over to her, to Diane. And I was like, no. And I stood right in front of her. And she was like, well, you're lucky I'm wearing a skirt today, or I'll, beat you up or something. So, that was my MO, kind of like I wasn't going to take any crap from anybody, even the toughest girl in the school, skirt or no. Anyway, oh my gosh, she's so funny. Oh! So that was my MO, and that was 8th grade, my second time in 8th grade. And it was great. It was fun. And then we went to 9th grade, and I started, our horizons broadened and our friend base broadened, and I kind of started to get into toward the end of 9th grade, just started experimenting with pot. And one of our friends, Eric, his father or stepfather was a truck driver, and he had all these black beauties and stuff, and that was actually the first thing that we did. He started bringing in black beauties, and we would do these black beauties, and then pot, and then blah blah blah, and I wasn't a burnout, and I wasn't like part of like the tough crowd. I wasn't part of the sports crowd. I wasn't part of the nerd crowd. I wasn't part of any crowd except for my own crowd, and that was like a point of pride for me. Like I always said, I would talk to anyone and be friends with anyone, and I had my own circle of friends, and but I did start hanging out with the burnouts a lot, and I started getting into heavy metal music, and I found myself really crafting a persona. And this sort of tough persona, and when I wasn't really tough, I didn't feel tough at all, and um, I really threw myself into it, like this whole heavy metal chick kind of thing, and I had the big hair, and I listened to you know, I listened to Ozzy. I listened with Randy Rhoads, of course, not the later Ozzy, but the two albums with Randy Rhoads, and oh my gosh, like Crocus and Rat, not really Rat, but um, Black Sabbath. That was a big one. Also, Rumors, Fleetwood Mac Rumors was like, I played that album so many times, like all the time. I would repeat it, put it on repeat. Um, but Black Sabbath, the one where like there's like a sort of blurry, it looks like it's fall or something like that. It's like a dismal sort of dreary cover, and it looks like there's a woman, and it's all blurry. I always thought it looked kind of like witchy or something like that, but that album, um, I can't. I'm like trying to remember what I listened to. Like, of course, that was a time where like Yes, Owner of the Lonely Heart, and Van Halen, Jump. These that's a time period, except it's a little later than what I'm actually talking about right now. But I really crafted this like whole persona, and I hid behind it. It made me feel strong. It made me feel powerful, and I used my power for good in my mind. Um, Although I did, as I said, I did get in a couple of fights, but they were kind of like jokes. Um, and one of them was to defend my brother. So, um, anyway, because he was getting bullied. Um, anyway, like I said, I built up this persona that kind of helped protect me. And I think, this fear that I have been carrying all my life, it feels like at this point, part of it stems from that crafting of a persona and then hiding behind it. But the funny thing was actually, in a way, well, not funny, but when all of that was ripped down, oh, by the way, I had this image in my head, so I'm just going to put it out there. Part of my persona was to, well, number one, I was shoplifting because I didn't have money. So I would, and it was a challenge to me, and I shoplifted. I shoplifted cigarettes, and I shoplifted magazines, and particularly like rock and roll magazines. And then I would cut up the magazines, and I would tape them very artfully all over my bedroom walls. So this was like part of my shield that kept me safe, right? And one of the times that I ran away from home, um, I was I went to a party, um, and my friends my friend's parents had gone away, and his sister was in college, and she invited like her college friends over, and my friend invited all of our friends, our group of friends over to his house, and um, we got, I didn't really get that drunk, but people got very drunk. And but I actually left in the middle of the party to go visit my boyfriend, and then this guy who was at the party um, came to get me and to go back to the party. And he's like, I want you to drive because I've been drinking. I'm like, well, I don't really know how to drive. Um, but he seemed to think that was better than than him having been drinking. So I had never been behind the wheel of a car before. Like, no, that's not true. I actually had gunned a car up the big hill to my neighborhood one time. That was like the only time I had ever driven a car, and it was like I drove it like I was in a fucking, I don't know, like a race car or something. So we're pulling out of this. It's dark. It's late. I'm in the driveway of an apartment complex, and I look up and there's a car waiting to turn in to the apartment complex. So I immediately was like, oh, I got to get out of here. And I gunned it, and the car like shot across the street, and I swerved the wheel so that I wouldn't like get crash over into the grass on the other side of the street. So I swerved the wheel and then immediately was like going right into a tree. And it just went into a tree. And I broke the steering wheel with my face. And the guy who wanted me to drive, I hope you can't hear that. My stomach is growling. The guy who wanted me to drive because he had been drinking was just like, you bitch, you crashed the car. And I was just sitting there holding my face and seeing blood all over my hands and feeling rather dazed. And I don't know how it all like went down, but I must have called my parents. I must have called them, and they came and got me and took me to the emergency room where Dr. Mata, I remember his name, Dr. Mata, sewed me up, and he's like did it in very very tiny stitches, very artfully, so that it turned into a flying V guitar. But I told my parents that I didn't want to go back home and please take me back to the party. So they did. They fucking did. And I went back to the party, and I was all messed up because my face was all messed up. It was all swollen, and it was. I'm not gonna talk about that. Well, maybe I will. I was on antibiotics. I think they put me on antibiotics, and I was sitting around in the kitchen. Everybody was in the kitchen. Well, a bunch of people were in the kitchen sitting around the table and drinking and smoking pot. And I smoked some pot. I wasn't a big drinker at that time. And I was smoking pot, and I got really paranoid and really like I was going to pass out. I felt like I was going to pass out. But before I was going to pass out, I looked across the table at this guy, um, Patrick Kelly. Um, there's a million Patrick Kellys in the world, so don't say that you're the one. Uh, I looked across at him and I was like, he looks like a judge. And then I passed out. I passed out. And they brought me into someone's room. It wasn't Steve's room, my friend Steve. It was maybe their parents' room. I don't know. And that was a weird night. But I told that story because everybody to me looks like a judge, you know. You know, like everybody feels like a judge to me, and I am always on trial. Um, but when I got back home from that whole thing, like my parents had taken all of those pictures that I had lovingly cut out and taped to the wall all over my room. Like I'm serious, like that was a there were a lot of pictures, and there were a lot of little tiny pictures fitted together in this lovely mosaic, and on the ceiling as well. And they had taken everything, and they hadn't thrown it away. They had like put it. They had stuck them all to each other, like so they were like all stuck on top of each other. And I sat there in my what once had been my room, and they had painted the walls, and um, it wasn't my room anymore. And I sat there in my room and just felt hollowed out, like it wasn't my place anymore. And it wasn't long after that that I was put in the hospital. And I was in the psych ward for that whole month of December 1983. And then after the new year, they were sending me to a mental hospital downstate, and they made me agree to it because they said it was better if I went willingly, because once you're like once you're committed against your will, it's worse for you, which is all just bullshit, really. Because basically what it was, like, you know, you go there voluntarily and then you ask to leave. And then if they don't want you to leave, like read if you still have insurance, and they don't want you to leave because they want your money, then they will do a review. And then if they say, if they deny your request to leave, then you automatically become involuntary. So it was all just, you know, bullshit. But anyway, I had agreed to go to this mental hospital. Hey, no. No. Get your shark. Get your shark. That. You can chew on that. So I'd agreed to go to the mental hospital voluntarily. But while I was packing, I took every scrap of writing that I had and threw it in the wastebasket in the bathroom. And that was my big vow, that I would never write again, because it had gotten me put in the hospital. it was only one of the things, obviously, that got me put in the hospital. But I tell this story so that I can tell the story of when I was leaving the mental hospital in the following May. I was there for 5 months, and I was leaving to go to a school in Massachusetts where I met Craig and ran away. But I didn't know that then. At the time, I thought I had gone to visit the school, and it was like going to visit a college, and I was kind of hopeful that I was going to go to this school and everything will, I can work things out and everything will be great, fine. But the night before I was going to leave the hospital, I had this really long, detailed, really like one of those dreams that you just recall completely when you wake up and afterward. But I did write it down, so that may be why I recalled it so long afterward. And in this dream, I was walking with my family. It just started a new video. I was walking with my family in the woods, and we were all walking along. Like, it wasn't just my family, it was all sorts of people walking through the woods. And in the dream, I noticed that all of these other people who were walking through the woods had raincoats on, and I didn't have one on, and none of my family had one on. And we're walking along, and we came to a barrier, a cliff face kind of thing, and I had to climb up it. And it was like the hardest thing I'd ever done, climbing up this sort of cliff face. And while I was climbing, I would encounter rocks, and I would think, oh, it's solid, it's a rock. And I would grab a hold of the rock, and it would start loosening and coming and falling out of the dirt. So I learned to let go of the rocks rather quickly. And I managed to clamber up through the dirt and, the crumbling dirt and everything until I started coming to some tree roots. And when I got to the tree roots, I could grab a hold of those tree roots and pull myself up, and I did. And I found myself on a tree branch that ran parallel, like a tree was right next to the cliff. The cliff was here, and the tree went here, and then there was like a branch that went like parallel to the cliff like this on both sides of the tree. And I had climbed up onto the tree, and I was like hanging onto the trunk and looking at this cliff, which was like maybe like 3 feet away from where I was standing. And I was like, how do I get over there? Because I had to get over and onto the trail again. And I'm standing there looking and trying to figure out how I was going to do that when I looked over on the other side of the tree branch, and my brother, Greg, was coming. And he just was walking stupidly. Like, he started walking on top of the branch, but then he kind of like started walking on the side of the branch until he finally just fell off. And I was like, well, that was dumb. Well, while he was doing it, I was like, that's dumb, but he fell. And then I looked down, and he looked up at me with like tears in his eyes, and he said, I'm sorry. And I think that's when I woke up. I don't think there was anything more to that dream, but it was really intense. Like, it was a really strong dream. And one of the things about that dream was everybody else had raincoats on, and we didn't. Like, my family did not. And why is that? What was the raincoat symbolic of? Some sort of protection against the weather, protection against the vicissitudes of life. And then what serves as that protection? That psychic or spiritual protection. What is that other people might have that we didn't have? And it's an important dream to me. I'm trying to think of how to fit this all together, though. Um, because it goes along with the story that I was telling about my grandmother and how her father and oldest brother got killed on Thanksgiving, and her whole life after that was a series of foster homes, um, and being a stranger, and always being the stranger, and always being the new one, and always being um, going to someplace else. Um, and she married my mother's father, and he turned out to be a bigamist, and so my grandmother got divorced, and then eventually met the grandfather I knew, my step grandfather, who married her and basically forced my mother to go to her biological father at the age of 5, and tell him that she did not want him to be her daddy anymore. Now, this man, he may have been a philanderer, he may have been a bigamist, but he did dote on my mother. And so I don't think my mother had bad memories of him or bad feelings for him at all, but she was made to do this, to tell him that she didn't want him to be her daddy. And then my step-grandfather adopted her and I think just like expunged everything, because he had powers. He had power. He had money. Um, and he sort of made it look like she was actually his daughter somehow. Um, but it was this whole thing that happened, and a horrible thing to do to a child. And then my grandmother would tell my mother that if she was bad, um, and and Jim left them, it would be all her fault. So my mother grew up in a very strict household. My step grandfather used to um, bounce quarters on her bed to make sure that she had made her bed correctly, and it was very regimented. And they also left her alone a lot because they were travelers, and she was left with her aunt, and whom she loved, and who cared very deeply for her. So it wasn't a bad thing, but I look back at this history and then look at my history of being like constantly moving throughout my entire life, never being rooted in a place, and never having a community that I can count on, and never having friends that I could count on, and then at 16 being sent away from my family, which was like the only constant in my life until then. So when I had that dream and I saw my family without raincoats on, it made sense to me. Um, because we don't belong in the world. Like we don't belong anywhere in the world. And it seemed to me like everybody else had that belonging in the world, as a child will, or as anyone sometime, as people do, tend to think everybody else has it better than they do. So I was thinking about all that this evening, in the context of realizing that I've always been afraid, and particularly of being found out to not be who I project myself to be. And then people will be able to hurt me. And then on the heels of that, I was thinking about Carl Jung, and one of the main things that Jung was thought was important was to try to find what your mythology is, like your personal mythology. And it's kind of what I've been getting at in a lot of these videos, all the stories that I tell myself. And what are the stories that I tell myself? Well, I've had this mythology that's been running through my head that kind of basically, the theme is that I'm alone in the world. What are you doing? Leave my blanket alone. Here, take the rope. Take the rope. Take the shark. Take the horn. I'm alone in the world. I am on the verge of, at any moment, being thrown out of wherever I am and sent away to a worse place, usually. And it's this big, long story that's backed up with all these other stories, with these all these stories, including my family history. So Jung has this thing about realizing what your mythology is, and I was also thinking about the Carlos Castaneda books, and which have been kind of coming up a lot lately for me. There's certain aspects of the Carlos Castaneda books. Stop. Hi. Hey, what you doing? Are you building a bed? Oh, I see. Gonna lie down? But one of them is recapitulating in life is a huge part of Carlos's training with Don Juan, is this recapitulation of his life, and which is what I've been doing. I've been doing it all along. I mean, which at this moment I think is sort of culminating in me making these talking videos and just speaking all of this stuff out. And you better believe I've written about these things over and over again, little bits and pieces of them, trying to purge it, trying to get it out. And I'm really I do believe that it is time to let go of the big old freaking story. One massive dump and get this shit out. and move on. I'm really tired of it, and I don't want to live this mythology anymore. And I'm glad Nana's settled down. And now that she's settled down, I think I'm done. I think I'm done talking. That's the story for tonight.